So in this cutting exercise, we're going to work with several elements. The first being a disconnection. We're going to leave the perimeter, in a sense, disconnected from the internal layer itself. Then we're also going to be working with a fringe. So the key component to this is elevation changes. Paneling is going to look a little bit intensive on this, and it's really purposeful because one panel here in the front is going to be for my fringe. The little 4 panels into the top are going to be for the layered portion. Then all of the bottom panel throughout is going to be the disconnected portion. So I already know in people's mind, they're thinking the perimeter is going to be disconnected from the layers and there's going to be a large gap between it. It's going to look like a shelf. And the answer is it doesn't have to. So what I want to do, first of all, I need to decide how much hair to be disconnected to create my perimeter. As I'm starting to look, this hair looks really skinny on the ends because there's not a lot of density here. I can see through this. I can see through the hair, I can see the scalp, and I can see the exposure of the neck and that sort of stuff here. So if I was to layer all the hair and then leave this down, you're gonna see through right here. So I need to come up a little bit higher and then take a look at it. Once I take a look at it now and it's starting to look fuller, I have less like kind of see-through. Then that starts to tell me that this is how much hair needs to stay down in order to create a fuller perimeter. And then this is what I can layer above this. Now that I've determined that, now I have to start thinking about the length of my layer in reference to how it's going to fall now down the actual head shape and then fall on top of my perimeter. If I take this section through and I cut a really short layer, it's going to be out here. And so the gap between this and the bottom of the perimeter is really wide, and this is going to stand up, and then it's going to look really disconnected from that bottom portion. So what I need to happen is I need my length of my layer to travel up and come down and past the round of the head, so then it lays flat to the head shape underneath the curve of the head, and then that will minimize the spacing between here and here. So you have to be mindful of how long or short you cut your layer. If I cut it really short, again, it's going to stand up and have a little bit more volume here, but it's going to create a massive separation between the length of my layer and the bottom of my perimeter. 2 key points is how much density to leave down for your perimeter, and then how long your layer needs to be to follow and go around the head shape and then fall down so it's laying underneath the curve of the head. That is how I'm coming up with the length of my layer. Now, again, if my layer length needs to be shorter or longer, then maybe I need to make a completely different approach to that. The end result of this haircut is all about understanding how elevation works. A really low elevation to create a heavier fringe in here, a really high elevation to create lightness to the top, and no elevation in the perimeter after we get done layering to create a really solid outline. My paneling for this haircut might look a little intense, but again, it's just to help me isolate different areas of elevation changes. Beginning with my fringe, I'm going to isolate the area from the widest part of the hairline to the widest part of the hairline, and then I'm just going to twist and clip this up. The way that I twist it is clockwise, and then I slide my clip in the way the hair might untwist, which is going to allow me to hold more hair for a longer period of time. Working from the apex down the mastoid process will help me isolate the front 2 areas of the haircut. The top panel is going to be my layer, the bottom panel is going to be my disconnected perimeter length. I'm going to twist and clip up my layered portion, and I'm just going to simply braid away the bottom of the panel where my perimeter is going to be. I'm going to continue this on into the back and then repeat the steps on the other side. So my top 4 panels across the top are where I'm going to be layering the hair, and that's going to allow me to reference the shape of the head and 90 degrees of the bone structure and 90 degrees from the root for my layered, and the front panel is just my fringe. If I was working this behind the chair with a guest, I might not use all of these panels. I might just use 2 across the top and then the fringe. The layering portion, I'm going to begin by taking a part of each side of my top 2 panels, and I'm going to elevate that hair up, and I'm going to look at the root, make sure that's 90 degrees from the root, and I'm just going to cut an increased cutting line from short to long using a traveling guide, which means section 2 is going to be brought to number 1, 3 to 2, 4 to 3, 5 to 4, 6 to 5, 7 to 6. The previous cut section is my reference for length, but I'm over directing every section to the previous cut section, so it's becoming slightly longer as it works its way into the back. My body position is just in front of my sections. This allows me to more easily pull the hair towards my previous cut section and cut. The key with this is keeping each section really clean and organized so you don't over direct the hair too much to create too much length into the back. On the diagram, the red arrow is just simply indicating where that hair is being over-directed from and where it's being cut at. So sometimes we have a tendency to over direct even our initial section, which is our guide length, and that doesn't need to be over directed at all. That needs to come straight up and then comb section number, whatever section that you're working on, to your guide. So I'm always combing the hair towards my length, and that allows me to control the right amount of over direction. Working into my last section here, I'm going to organize that hair, comb it straight down. So all that's in my hand, every section, is my guide length and the hair that I'm cutting. Now to cross check, I'm just going to look for consistency and shape from front to back. I didn't just pull it straight up to cross check it. I cross checked it in reference of what was 90 from the head shape. On the opposite side, I'm using the first part of my guide from section number 1, and I'm working the other direction now. The biggest difference is my cutting line is now working from the top of the section to the bottom of the section. One of the things you have to keep in mind when you do this is just not follow the head all the way down and lose your length or take your layer slightly shorter, which is one of the most common things that I see when people are cutting a truly convex layer, is they follow the head shape too much and they don't know what their layer length needs to be in order to protect the perimeter length. Here we just braided the perimeter length away, so I'm not going to run the risk of cutting into it, but still being mindful of what elevation needs to look like from the root of the hair in order to protect the outside length of the layer and not make it get too short. So in the fringe, I'm just going to work my first section, pulling it down into little to no elevation. I'm just going to point cut into my fringe. This is just going to allow me to create a softer result on such a low amount of elevation. So if I don't point cut this at all, my fringe is going to be really heavy and very, very blunt. On the other side, I'm going to work from long to short and just rely on my cutting line to be symmetrical from left side to right side. Last part of my fringe, I'm pulling it all the way back down on top of section number 1, pulling it down. Now, anytime you're using like a point cut as your main cutting line, your lines from section to section are going to be slightly inconsistent, and you need to just let that happen because that actually creates more softness in the fringe. Trying to replicate the exact same point cutting from section to section is not going to do you a lot of good. Now in refinement, I'm going to take a section from top to bottom, and what I'm going to look at is where that layer stopped and where my perimeter began. And when I look at this, I'm going to see a density change from the shortness of my layer into the bottom of that perimeter length. That I'm just going to slide cut in from where the layer stopped into the perimeter length to blend it through a little bit more. So you can really see how heavy that was at the top where the layer. So sometimes we don't realize that when we cut a layer, yeah, you remove the weight, but you just made all the weight fall to a specific area. Now there still needs to be some blending that needs to happen when you come back in. Again, I'm looking for the density change here right through at the top. I'm going to slide cut down. That's going to blend that little front length into that. Now you might be saying, well, why didn't I do this at the very beginning? Because this allows me to keep the perimeter where it's at, and then I just blend the layer into the perimeter. We have a tendency to always cut the perimeter first and then layer secondary when we're creating a convex layer. Now all the way through the back now, I'm going to work a vertical section from the top all the way down to the bottom of the perimeter, and I'm just working from where the layers stop down into the bottom of the perimeter. I'm just using a slide cutting or a whittling method, and that's just allowing me to create short to long pieces from the layer all the way down into the perimeter. How much you have to do is going to totally depend on the density and the texture of the hair. Now on the outline, I'm just going to clean up the scraggly little hairs that I see. So there's my end result of my length and my perimeter. And now for the styling, I'm just going to curl one side and leave the other side flat. This is just to show consistency in the layering from left side to right side, and that you can wear the hair straight or you can wear the hair curly, and it's going to look great either way.